which the firm is now involved in. In a few moments, what we're going to attempt to do is to demonstrate for you what an appreciative inquiry interview would look like. This is the kind of interview that you're going to be conducting with the partners that you'll be interviewing in the next month. What you're going to see is 30 minutes of an approximately 2 to 3 hour interview process. That's the time you'll be spending with each of the partners that you'll interview. What you'll notice is that the appreciative inquiry interview process or methodology is one that focuses on the best of what
Dr. John Carter is a consultant who is a familiar face to most partners at Touche Ross. He's been providing consulting services and advice to the firm for 16 years, and he's asked Dr. David Cooperrider to join him in presenting this introduction to the Appreciative Inquiry. Dr. David Cooperrider is a professor of organizational behavior at Case Western Reserve University, Weatherhead School of Management, where he and his colleagues are working on appreciative methods for organizational analysis.
Hi, welcome to the round table. I want to congratulate you on your being selected to conduct the Appreciative Inquiry study, which is a part of the round table program which the firm is now involved in. In a few moments, what we're going to attempt to do is to demonstrate for you what an appreciative inquiry interview would look like. This is the kind of interview that you're going to be conducting with the partners that you'll be interviewing in the next month. What you're going to see is 30 minutes of an approximately 2 to 3 hour interview process. That's the time you'll be spending with each of the partners that you'll interview. What you'll notice is that the appreciative inquiry interview process or methodology is one that focuses on the best of what is. It focuses on what the firm does well. Not only what it does well in the present, but it also focuses on what the firm has done well in the past, as a way of attempting to surface and bring to the forefront the particular things that are really valued and cared about by the partners who are part of Touche Ross. Also, as a part of this process, what you'll notice is that there is an emphasis and a focus on what the partners desire for themselves and the firm in the future. Pay attention as you watch the interview process, and you'll notice that there is a significant focus on what the firm does, how it does it, and when and where it occurs. So that each time there is discussion by the interviewee of something that he or she is very excited about, there's an attempt to focus in and get as much detail about that particular event or situation as possible, so that out of that we will be able to pull some particular themes and topics that you'll be able to work on in the September session.
One way to appreciate the nature of an appreciative inquiry is to contrast it with a familiar activity, problem solving. In a problem-solving mode, we begin by identifying the problems. In contrast, the appreciative inquiry begins by identifying our valuing of the best of what is. In this case, the best of what is at Touche Ross. The second stage of problem solving is to analyze the causes of the problems. In contrast, the appreciative inquiry moves from the present tense to envision what might be in the future. The third stage of problem solving typically becomes a process to analyze various solutions. In contrast, the appreciative inquiry begins a process of dialogue to identify elements of a vision which can be shared with others. In the final stage of problem solving, we develop action plans to introduce solutions. In contrast, the appreciative inquiry promotes innovative ways to move the organization closer to the ideal or vision. Now, to illustrate an appreciative inquiry in action, we'll see David Cooperrider interviewing Alan Willis, a partner of Touche Ross.
Alan, I appreciate you spending some time with me today. What I want to do is spend probably about an hour with you, beginning to look at your experiences in this organization specifically to try and find out when you see this organization operating at its very best. What we're conducting here is we call an appreciative interview. It's quite different than a problem-solving analysis in the sense that I'm not here looking for what are the problems or what are the barriers to performance or the organization here at Touche Ross. What I'm really interested in finding out is what are the life-giving factors to the organization. When this organization is operating at its very best, what's happening and why? So what I have is a series of about 10 questions, and I'd like to spend some time with you and go into each one in some detail and begin to try and spark your imagination and begin to find out from your experiences what is it about Touche Ross when it's working at its very best. Two things I'd like to say before we do get into the interview. All the interview data that I do collect is going to be handled confidentially. I will not be putting your name to the data. And what we'll try and do is begin to put themes together. As partners throughout the firm are interviewed, we're going to try and find together and see if we can piece together a picture of Touche Ross in an idealistic sense when it is at its very best. So do you have any questions for me about the interview itself, or thoughts about, or questions about what appreciative inquiry might be?
Ready to go, and I'll just respond to whatever you throw at me and see what happens.
Okay. I have a few questions at the beginning, and I'd like to keep notes today, if that's possible. I have a few questions that I'd like to do just to kick us off and to begin to get an understanding of who you are and how you got to this firm. First of all, I'd like to find out a little bit about your beginnings with Touche Ross. What attracted you to this firm? What was it? Can you recall your initial impressions, your initial excitements, your initial thoughts about joining this firm?
Well, sure. I first joined Touche Ross coming to Canada from England, 1968 thereabouts, to Halifax, Nova Scotia, and I think my excitement on joining Touche was very much mixed with my excitement about coming to a new country and creating a new life in a new land and all that good stuff. But certainly I sort of looked forward to the encounter with what I perceived from England to be the North American business way of life kind of a thing, and I was looking forward to that kind of stuff. And early on, I may say I got what felt like a good taste of it. So I spent 2 or 3 years in Nova Scotia, and then I came to Montreal, still with Touche Ross, to our national office, which was in Montreal in those days. And again did some different kind of work, and again tasted some more of this the Montreal way of life, and again being closer to the centre of the firm, got much more of a feel for a lot more of Touche Ross than I got down in Nova Scotia. So I think it was in that period in Montreal that I began to have what I think in your literature you would call some of these exciting experiences that I think you want to probe into some more. For example, making films, for example, was the last thing I expected to be doing, and yet my work called for me to, start making documentary movies and so forth, and that was exciting stuff to be doing for a young fellow in those days. And then if you wanted just to move on a little further, I then actually left the firm for 4 years, from 72 to 76, and then came back with the firm in 76, and I've been with Touche ever since, of course.
Okay. What was it that attracted you back? What was it about the firm itself? There must have been something there that caused you to want to return to Touche Ross.
Well, I think a lot of it was the ties I had established with the people in Touche before I had left was a part of it. I had liked a lot of the work I had done, as well as the people I had done it with. And when I was outside the firm, I think I had also an opportunity to reflect on what I valued about Touche, in the sense of the sort of collegial professional atmosphere, the client contact, the variety of assignments even then, and some particular things which even then I perceived differentiated Touche from some of the other firms in terms of how it dealt with people, the kind of structure of the organization, and generally how it did its business. In fact, it was a fun place to come and work, kind of a thing. And I think in those days as well, and maybe even now, we still thought of Touche as being somehow maybe more creative or innovative than some of the other firms, and certainly had a different attitude towards dealing with people and developing people. Those are the kinds of things which I think made me feel good about an opportunity in 76 when I could come back with the firm.
Okay, terrific. Those are precisely some of the things that I'm going to want to explore in more detail as we go on in the interview. I'm going to want to look at some of the things that you talked about in terms of the collegial professional atmosphere, the variety in assignments. You mentioned the notion of fun and the place to work and the creative involvement that you've had here. going to want to explore a number of those dimensions in much more detail to try and find out what is it about the organization that enhances those factors for you.
Okay.
In the first part of the interview, Dave encouraged Alan to focus on the positive aspects of working at Touche Ross by assuming its health and vitality.
Let's look for a moment in terms of your entire life history in this organization, your life adventure here in this organization. Every person's career has its ups and downs, its peaks and valleys, its twists and turns. What I'd like to begin to focus in on for a moment are the peaks. Looking at your entire experience, can you recall a time when you felt most alive, when you felt most fulfilled or most excited about your work here at Touche Ross?
Well, I think off the top three perhaps occur to me of the type you're getting at. One would be the movie making experience I alluded to, going way back when, in '72, somewhere in there, and that certainly was a very memorable and exciting time. Mm-hmm. Then I think further along the way, in the period, sort of, I'm not sure if an experience could last over more than a few moments, but there was a period in the late '70s when I was doing a lot of work in the firm around some stuff which we called performance review and personal planning. Okay. And there was some very good stuff in there. But I think more recently, in the last 6 months, I've had a particular client project which I think in many ways has been one of the most exciting events for me professionally in my new sort of career in the consulting practice.
Okay. Can we explore that third one, the most recent one, your client experience, a little bit more detail? What I'd like to understand, what made it such an exciting experience? It stands out, obviously, in your mind. What was it that went into it? Can you think of some of the ingredients, some of the people involved, some of the things that were going on in the situation?
Another characteristic of an appreciative interview is to focus on key examples that are most exciting to the interviewee. Identify it and check back with the interviewee that in fact he or she agrees that it is a key example for them too.
Well, I think the first thing to recall, which was exhilarating at the time, was even getting the assignment, which was one we hadn't even expected to be offered, as it were, to bid on. And out of the blue, I got a phone call one day from one of our managers over in National Office saying that he had come across a particular client contact who was into doing some particular project in their organization. And it had occurred to this manager in National that this was a situation where we in Touche, and I in particular, might be able to help. And it was through that particular phone call that then I made contact with the client organization and this colleague of mine. And from there, we developed the whole thing into a proposal to do some work. And you know, we eventually got the job and did, I think, a very good job on it. But I think what was exciting just at that early stage was the way in which, through the firm's network, if you will, the opportunity ever came to me. And then there was a very short time frame in which to respond to this, because already this client had had 2 or 3 proposals in from other organizations. So we had a very tight turnaround in which I had to go out and interview the client person, collect some data, develop a proposal, and get the whole thing in. And I think there were some pieces of there which all contribute to why that was a good thing to be doing. One was that it turned out, by luck, that the client person himself was a person I related to very easily. There was very good chemistry instantly between us. So it was like a client relationship sprung up instantaneously, even though we weren't, you know, in a client relationship yet.
Right.
But it felt good just, you know, exchanging stuff, information with him, and you know, collecting what I needed to collect to do a proposal. And I think the next piece of that was coming back in, bringing it back into Touche, and then getting hold of one of our senior consulting staff and one of our senior consulting partners who had a lot of HR-type consulting experience. And again, working with those 2 people very quickly to develop an approach, and quite a creative approach to dealing with this client's needs, and getting all that together and serving up, you know, what turned out to be a successful proposal. And then getting the news ultimately within a few days that in fact they'd decided to come with us and give us the work. which was a piece of work which was right up my own particular sort of area of interest, based on earlier stuff I had done. We're talking here about, again, personal planning, performance planning, and performance appraisal.
Okay.
So I had a lot of personal excitement about the nature of the work that was to be done, and I knew that we hadn't done any prior consulting work of this type with this particular client, so it felt like we were breaking new ground and getting into this client in the place we hadn't got in before. So there were a lot of firsts and pluses around this, and it was all happening when I was personally very busy with other clients. So I wasn't just sitting around waiting for the phone to go. I mean, I was busy with about 2 other clients at the time, so it was a real scramble, and somehow all this just came together in about 3 weeks. So I'm sure I had a big sort of letdown at the end of it, but just getting the job in itself was an exciting, time.
If I can summarize, what I hear is a number of factors that went into it. Part of it was just all the firsts that were involved in the whole thing. And secondly was the networking, actually networking to get the idea started and to help implement the idea within the firm and with the client. The second was the challenge of the tight turnaround, or the third was the challenge of the tight turnaround. And fourth, what I hear is that kind of a sense of teamwork or support here in the firm, that you could call on people to help you out in whatever needs that you might have had.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's another piece to the teamwork too, the knowledge that I was working with 2 people in Toronto to pull this thing together. But a key piece of this was the fact that some of the work had to be done in Quebec in French, and knowing again another partner I know well up in Montreal could handle the Quebec end of this, and it was just this feeling of being able to deliver, meet the client's needs, drawing on a lot of internal resources, and again that was it happens every day around here, but it's nice when it happens and it all comes together for you.
What was it about you that made it a peak experience?
Well, I think the firsts, we have a lot of talk in the firm these days about having firsts and being winners and all the rest, and I think it was a personal sense of winning, and it's in a situation where I was lucky even to be in the game, never mind to be able to win. And for me personally, I think it was certainly another experience for me in terms of establishing myself in a new career track in the consulting practice as opposed to my previous internal training work. So I think personally I felt kind of rewarded and somehow gratified that I was able to kind of pull this off and get this thing together. And there was a certain measure of recognition around it, I guess, as well, which was important to me. So it rewarded me in some personal ways as well as just being good business.
Throughout the interview, Dave encourages Alan to maintain his appreciative or affirmative imagination by maintaining rapport using empathy, letting Alan know that Dave has heard him and has empathy for Alan's position and ideas. Next, we'll see the techniques Dave uses to guide the conversation to get more specific, in-depth information.
Were there any other factors in terms of the organization, the leadership in the organization at that time, the structure of the organization, the reward system, the way that was set up? Is there anything in particular that also helped or allowed you to make this whole thing happen?
It's a tough one to respond to.
Here's what I'm thinking. I know in so many organizations that I go into, there are so many barriers to any kind of creative process that you're talking about here, where you make something happen quickly. And there must be something here that allowed you to move on this.
Well, I think we already talked about the networking thing, and in my case, partly from being around quite a long time and having moved around the firm a lot, I have fairly extensive networks, as they say anyway. It's not as if I'm stuck in one office the whole time and never see anybody else. I feel very mobile around the organization. I know where all the people are and the places are and how to move around within the organization. And I have to say, there isn't a great deal of red tape and protocol. You don't have to kind of go up to the boss's boss and across and then down something in order to get to talk to somebody over here. You just kind of,
go right to the source.
Just as my colleague over in National knew where I was and who I was and what I was doing, and he very quickly said, Alan's the guy to do this, and got the call across to me. There's a lot of informality, freedom to move around, not a lot of red tape and protocol. So it makes it easy to move around and get things done. And the same with talking, using a resource up in Montreal. It's no big deal at all. I know the guy, pick up the phone, and he quickly knows what I want, and we can get something going.
Well, I'm going to want to pick up on that notion of the flexible structure, the ability for you to go wherever you need to go to talk, to gather resources and so on. I think that's a real key feature of this organization, and I want to try and understand that more in a few moments. Let's talk for a moment about some things that you value fairly deeply. Specifically, the things that you value most about three things. First, yourself, the nature of your work, and the firm. And without being too humble, what I'd like to do is first ask you, what do you value most about yourself as a human being, as a partner in this firm, as a parent, or what have you?
Well, that's another tough one, David, but...
Throughout the interview, Dave provides psychological support and communicates that he's excited and values Alan as a human being. Now, at first, Alan feels some discomfort talking about himself on this personal level, but Dave's support encourages Alan to discuss how he values himself. Later, this will make it easier for him to focus in on valuing the organization.
I think one of the things I, if you like, value about myself, what I bring to any situation, certainly work and other places, is things like seeing relationships between things. I must be one of the world's ultimate lateral thinkers. In a sense, I seem to constantly relate things which previously were not seen in a related way, which in turn means any situation I move into, even one I'm in right now, part of the value of my being around, I think, is, I call it asking dumb questions, but looking at things differently and seeing a situation which people may have wrestled with for a long, long time and got blocked around, and I will come in and look at it quite differently and ask you some question which will in turn free them up and have them look at the thing differently. And I think that's another sort of useful part of me. And another part which can get out of control at times, but is often is useful, is I just have a sense of fun. I normally, when I'm up and doing good stuff, I'm usually enjoying it, and I'm demonstrating that I enjoy it. I guess I have a lot of spontaneous enthusiasm and even a sense of fun, and again, I can be slightly off the wall, and has to be watched a little bit because it can throw people, but I think the sense of fun is an important part of what I bring to the table.
Okay.
I think the other part I'll speak to, which gets us into the firm, and again, why I think I value Touche Ross particularly, is just a sort of inbred desire to see fair play. Don't like seeing people